I should have known something was wrong when the hostess kept glancing at her reservation book with that apologetic smile servers perfect when they're about to deliver bad news. "Table for 4 still?" she asked, her voice lilting upward like a question mark hanging in the air. I nodded, clutching my purse strap a little tighter, and followed her to a corner booth that suddenly felt enormous. The burgundy leather seats stretched out like an accusation, each empty space a reminder of promises that were about to be broken. My name is Hazel, and at 29, I'd finally done something that felt impossible just 2 years ago. After 6 years of grinding through night classes while working full-time at a marketing firm, I'd not only finished my MBA, but landed the promotion that came with it. Marketing director. It wasn't just a title change. It was everything I'd sacrificed for. Every Friday night I'd spent studying instead of going out with friends. Every vacation I'd skipped to save money for tuition. Every relationship that fizzled because I was too tired, too busy, too focused on building something that would last. If you're enjoying this tale of family dynamics and personal boundaries, please hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Stories like these resonate because so many of us have been in similar situations, feeling overlooked by the very people who should celebrate our wins. Share this with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to prioritize yourself sometimes. The waiter approached with practiced efficiency, setting down water glasses and asking if I wanted to start with drinks. "I'll wait for the rest of my party," I said, the words feeling hollow even as they left my mouth. He nodded politely and retreated, probably calculating in his head how long he'd give me before gently suggesting I might want to order something to avoid taking up prime real estate during the dinner rush. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through the message thread one more time. The invitation I'd sent 3 days ago had been enthusiastic, maybe even a little desperate in retrospect. Big news to celebrate. Dinner Thursday at 7, Romano's on 5th Street. Can't wait to share this with you all. The responses had trickled in throughout the week. "Mom? Wouldn't miss it, honey." My older sister Jessica. "Finally, about time you got recognized." My younger brother Tyler. "Count me in, sis, proud of you." Even my stepfather David had chimed in with a simple but encouraging, "Looking forward to it." But now, 37 minutes past 7, the empty booth felt like a museum exhibit of misplaced trust. I'd chosen Romano specifically because it was Mom's favorite place, the kind of mid-upscale Italian restaurant where the portions were generous and the atmosphere warm enough for family celebrations. The same place where we'd celebrated Jessica's engagement 3 years ago, where we'd toasted Tyler's graduation from trade school, where David had surprised Mom with anniversary dinner last spring. My phone buzzed. A text from Jessica, running super late. "Order without me, be there soon." No explanation, no apology, just the casual assumption that I'd understand. I stared at the message, noting the timestamp, 39 minutes after we were supposed to meet. Running late implied she was on her way. The lack of specificity suggested otherwise. Another buzz. Tyler this time. "Rain check?" "Something came up with work. Congrats, though." Something came up. The universal excuse for backing out of commitments that weren't quite important enough to honor. I'd used it myself, though never for family celebrations, never for moments that someone had specifically asked me to share. The restaurant was filling up around me. Couples leaning across small tables, families with teenagers who looked bored but present, business associates wrapping up deals over dessert and wine. Everyone seemed to belong to their moment, while I sat there like an understudy who'd been forgotten backstage. At 8:15, I finally ordered an appetizer I didn't want, mainly to justify taking up the booth any longer. The spinach and artichoke dip arrived with a flourish of Parmesan and a side of guilt that I was eating alone on what was supposed to be one of the best nights of my career. That's when my phone lit up with a notification that made my stomach drop. A Facebook post. I almost didn't look, but the preview showed multiple tagged family members, which was unusual enough to catch my attention. I clicked. The photo was perfectly staged. My family, Mom, Jessica, Tyler, and David, sitting around a high-top table at Brewster's Pub, the trendy craft beer place downtown. Jessica was holding up a champagne flute, while Tyler had his arm around Mom's shoulders. David was raising a beer bottle toward the camera. They all looked genuinely happy, genuinely celebratory. The caption read, "Family dinner to celebrate our Jessica's big promotion to regional sales manager. So proud of our girl. Family first, always." I read it 3 times before the words fully registered. Jessica's promotion to regional sales manager. A promotion she'd apparently received and decided to celebrate on the exact same night I'd planned my own celebration. The same night she'd confirmed she'd be at Romano's with me. I screenshotted the post without really knowing why, maybe as evidence of something I couldn't quite name yet. Then I noticed the timestamp, 8:03 p.m. They'd been there for a while, long enough to order, receive their food, and pose for photos. This wasn't a last-minute change of plans. This was a deliberate choice. My phone buzzed again, a text from Mom that would replay in my head for weeks afterward. "You're not exactly a priority right now. We'll catch up soon. Enjoy your dinner." The casualness of it was breathtaking. 29 years of being someone's daughter, and I'd just been relegated to catch up soon status via text message while they celebrated someone else's success at a restaurant 6 blocks away from where I sat alone. I paid the check, $43 for food I'd barely touched, and walked to my car in a haze. The drive home was automatic. Muscle memory navigating familiar streets while my mind tried to process what had just happened. I'd been dismissed, literally and figuratively, by the people who were supposed to show up for me. The people who'd raised me to believe that family was everything, that blood was thicker than water, that we'd always have each other's backs. When I finally made it inside my apartment, I didn't turn on the lights immediately. I just stood in my entryway, still holding my purse, still wearing the dress I'd chosen specifically for tonight, the navy blue one with the subtle professional cut that said, "Success," without screaming it. I'd wanted to look put together, but approachable, confident, but not intimidating. I'd wanted to look like someone worth celebrating. Instead, I looked like someone who'd dressed up for a party no one else wanted to attend. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat cross-legged on my living room floor with my laptop open, surrounded by bank statements, receipts, and a growing pile of tissues that told the story of my evening better than words ever could. But I wasn't crying from sadness anymore. I was crying from anger, the kind that builds slowly over years until one moment cracks it wide open. I'd started what I was calling the audit around midnight, pulling up every Venmo transaction, every bank transfer, every "can you help us out just this once" that had become a monthly tradition. The numbers were staggering. In the past 3 years alone, I'd sent over $47,000 to various family members. Car repairs for Tyler when his transmission died. Emergency dental work for Mom when her insurance didn't cover the crown. Jessica's wedding deposit when her fiancé's family suddenly couldn't contribute their promised share. David's business loan payment when his consulting firm hit a rough patch. Each transaction had its own story, its own urgent phone call, its own promise of payback that somehow never materialized. I'd kept meticulous records, a habit from my accounting classes, but I'd never actually added it all up before. Now, seeing the total in black and white, I felt physically sick. My phone buzzed constantly throughout the night, Mom calling every hour on the hour until around 2 a.m., Jessica texting increasingly frantic messages. "Where are you? Are you okay? Call me back." Tyler's contributions were shorter but more frequent. "Seriously? Answer your phone." Even David, who usually stayed out of family drama, had sent a measured text. "Hazel, your mother is worried. Please respond so we know you're safe." But I wasn't ready to respond. I was too busy excavating the archaeological layers of my own financial history, finding patterns I'd been too close to see before. The timing was always the same. Family emergencies that coincidentally arose right after my bonus checks or tax refunds. The guilt was always deployed with surgical precision, wrapped in language about family loyalty and mutual support. I found the email thread from Jessica's wedding planning, where she'd casually mentioned that her promotion to regional sales manager had come with a significant salary bump. That was 8 months ago. 8 months during which she'd still asked me to cover her student loan payments twice because things were tight. The same Jessica who'd just celebrated her success at an expensive restaurant while I sat alone 6 blocks away. Around 4 a.m., I discovered something that made me physically nauseous. A group text thread that I wasn't included in, but that Tyler had accidentally added me to 3 months ago before quickly removing me. I'd gotten just enough of a glimpse to see Mom asking, "Did anyone check if Hazel can cover the utility deposit for Tyler's new place?" Jessica had responded, "She will. She always does. Just don't make it sound like we're asking for charity." They had a system. They discussed my money like it was a shared resource, my generosity like it was an ATM they could access whenever needed. I wasn't family to them. I was a financial safety net with an emotional attachment. The sun was rising when I finally closed the laptop. My apartment felt different in the morning light. Cleaner somehow, like I had swept out something that had been cluttering it for years. I made coffee, real coffee from the expensive beans I usually saved for special occasions, and sat on my balcony watching my neighbors start their days. Normal people with normal problems, going to jobs they chose, spending money they earned, making decisions without consulting a committee of relatives who judged them for not being generous enough. My phone rang. Mom again. This time, I answered. "Hazel, oh thank God I've been calling all night. Are you okay? We were so worried when you didn't show up last night." The rewriting of history was instant and shameless. I hadn't failed to show up. They had abandoned me. But Mom's version painted me as the absent one, the one who'd caused worry by disappearing. "I was at Romano's," I said quietly, "sitting alone at a table for 4, waiting for my family to show up to celebrate my promotion." Silence stretched between us like a chasm. Then, Mom's voice, smaller now. "Oh, honey, we didn't know you were still planning that. Jessica mentioned her promotion came through yesterday and we thought, well, we assumed you'd understand." Understand what? That her news was time-sensitive. The company wanted to take her and her team out Friday, so we figured Thursday was our only chance to celebrate as a family. I laughed, a sound so bitter it surprised even me. So my celebration got canceled because hers was more urgent? It wasn't canceled, sweetheart. We just miscommunicated. Did we miscommunicate when I sent you the restaurant details 3 days ago? When you confirmed you'd be there, when I specifically said I had big news to share?" Another pause. When Mom spoke again, her tone had shifted from apologetic to defensive. "Hazel, you know we love you and we're proud of you. But Jessica's been struggling with confidence at work, and this promotion was such a surprise for her. We wanted to make sure she felt supported." "And what about making sure I felt supported? You're always so strong, so independent. You don't need the same kind of encouragement that Jessica does." There it was. The family mythology that had shaped our dynamics for years. Hazel doesn't need attention because Hazel is strong. Hazel doesn't need financial help because Hazel has a good job. Hazel doesn't need emotional support because Hazel is independent. I'd been so busy being strong that they'd forgotten I was also human. "Mom," I said, my voice steadier than I felt, "I need you to listen to me very carefully." Last night, I sat alone at a restaurant for 2 hours, checking my phone every few minutes, making excuses to the waitstaff, and eventually eating dinner by myself while looking at photos of you all celebrating Jessica at another restaurant. Do you understand how that felt? We didn't think. No, you didn't think. You didn't think about me at all." The conversation continued for another 20 minutes, with Mom cycling through the stages of damage control. Minimization, "It was just one dinner." Deflection, "You're being too sensitive." Bargaining, "We'll plan something special just for you." And finally, when nothing else worked, guilt. "I never thought my daughter would punish me for supporting her sister." I hung up when she said that. Not angrily, not dramatically, just quietly pressed the red button and set my phone face down on the table. That afternoon, I did something I'd never done before. I opened my banking app and looked at the automatic transfers I'd set up for various family members. Mom's car payment, $389 monthly. Tyler's phone bill, $95 monthly. Jessica's student loan assist, $200 monthly. David's business insurance, $156 monthly. Small amounts individually, but together they added up to $840 every month that left my account before I even saw it. I'd set up these transfers during different crisis moments, always with the understanding that they were temporary. "Just until I get back on my feet," had been the common refrain. But temporary had become permanent, and permanent had become expected. These weren't gifts anymore. They were obligations. I started with Tyler's phone bill, canceled. Then Jessica's student loan transfer, canceled. Mom's car payment took longer because I had to call the bank directly. But within an hour, that was canceled too. David's business insurance was the hardest because he'd never actually asked for help. Mom had volunteered my assistance during one of his rough patches, and I'd been too polite to refuse. With each cancellation, I felt something shifting inside me. Not relief exactly, but something like clarity. For the first time in years, my money was going to stay in my account. My paycheck was going to reflect my work, not my family's needs. That evening, I treated myself to Thai food from the place I'd been wanting to try but had always deemed too expensive. I ate it on my couch, watching a movie I'd picked purely because I wanted to see it, not because it was family-friendly or because someone else had chosen it. The silence in my apartment wasn't lonely, it was mine. Around 9 p.m. the texts started arriving. Not from Mom this time, but from Tyler. "Hey, my phone got cut off. Did something happen with the autopay?" Followed immediately by Jessica. "My student loan payment bounced. Can you check on that transfer?" I read them both, screenshotted them for my growing collection of evidence, and turned my phone face down again. Tomorrow would bring more calls, more texts, more demands, disguised as family emergencies. But tonight, for the first time in years, I was going to sleep without worrying about anyone's problems but my own. The last thing I remember before drifting off was the sound of my neighbors laughing through the thin walls, a sound that reminded me that joy didn't always have to be earned, scheduled, or shared. Sometimes it could just exist, quiet and personal, and entirely your own. The next morning arrived with the subtlety of a sledgehammer. My phone started buzzing at 6:47 a.m., and by the time I'd stumbled to the kitchen to make coffee, I had 17 missed calls and a text thread that had exploded overnight like a digital dumpster fire. Mom had apparently discovered the canceled transfers sometime around midnight, because the timestamps on her increasingly frantic messages painted a clear picture of her evening. It started with confusion. "Hazel, honey, the bank called about some changes to automatic payments. Can you call me when you get this?" Then escalated to panic. "The car payment didn't go through. I got a late notice email. Something's wrong with your account." And finally landed on accusation. "I know you're upset about dinner, but this is not the way to handle it. Call me immediately." Jessica's contributions were more direct. "What the hell, Hazel? My student loan payment bounced and now I have a late fee. Fix this." Tyler was characteristically brief. "Phone's still dead. Need this sorted ASAP." But it was David's message that stopped me cold. "Hazel, I understand you're hurt about last night, but cutting off financial support without warning puts your mother's housing situation at risk. We need to discuss this rationally. Housing situation at risk. As if Mom's car payment was somehow connected to keeping a roof over her head. As if my 29-year-old paycheck was the cornerstone of the family's financial stability. The manipulation was so smooth, so practiced, that I almost admired the craftsmanship. I poured my coffee into the oversized mug I'd bought myself last Christmas, the one with self-made, printed in gold letters that Jessica had rolled her eyes at when she'd seen it. "A little on the nose, don't you think?" she'd said. At the time, I'd felt embarrassed. Now, holding it in my hands, it felt like a prophecy. At 7:15 a.m., Mom called again. This time, I answered. "Hazel Elizabeth, what in God's name do you think you're doing?" The use of my full name was a throwback to childhood, a power play designed to make me feel small and corrected. Instead, it reminded me that I was 30, not 13, and that I'd earned the right to make my own financial decisions. "I'm stopping automatic payments from my account," I said calmly. "It's my money, and I've decided to keep it. But these aren't just random payments. These are commitments, responsibilities. Your family depends on this." "My family," I repeated slowly, "just celebrated Jessica's promotion without me while I sat alone at a restaurant waiting for them." "That was a misunderstanding." "We explained that." "No, Mom. A misunderstanding is showing up to the wrong restaurant or getting the time confused. What happened last night was a choice. You chose Jessica's celebration over mine." The silence that followed was different from her usual pauses. It wasn't strategic or manipulative. It was the sound of someone realizing their script wasn't working anymore. "We didn't mean to hurt you," she said finally, her voice smaller. "But you did, and instead of apologizing or trying to make it right, you're calling me at 7 in the morning to demand I restore financial support that you've never once acknowledged or thanked me for. Of course we're grateful. It's understood, isn't it? Family helps family. When's the last time anyone in this family helped me with anything?" Another pause. Longer this time. I could practically hear her scrolling through memories, looking for evidence of reciprocal support that we both knew didn't exist. "You never asked for help," she said weakly. "I shouldn't have to ask my family to show up for my promotion dinner." At 9 a.m., I did something that felt both terrifying and liberating. I drove to the bank and closed the shared savings account I'd opened 2 years ago for family emergencies. The account that had somehow become a slush fund for everyone else's poor planning. Jessica's car down payment when her credit was rejected. Tyler's security deposit when he decided to move out of his friend's couch. Mom's vacation fund when she and David decided they needed a getaway but couldn't afford it on their own. The banker, a kind woman named Patricia who'd helped me set up the account originally, looked concerned as she processed the closure. "Is everything all right, Miss Chen? You seemed excited about this account when we opened it." "Everything's fine," I said, and realized I meant it. "I just don't need it anymore." Walking out of the bank felt like shedding a coat I'd been wearing in summer heat. Immediate relief, followed by the question of why I'd kept it on for so long. My lunch break was interrupted by an unexpected visitor. Jessica had somehow gotten past building security and was waiting by my office door when I returned from the cafeteria. She looked different than she had in the Facebook photos. Less polished, more frantic. Her usually perfect blonde hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and she wasn't wearing the designer blazer she'd splurged on with her last promotion bonus. "We need to talk," she said, following me into my office uninvited. "Do we?" I settled behind my desk, creating physical distance between us. "Hazel, this is getting out of hand. Mom's been crying all morning. Tyler's freaking out because his phone got shut off at work, and now his boss is pissed. You can't just cut everyone off without warning." I leaned back in my chair, studying my sister's face. When had she gotten so comfortable assuming my financial support was guaranteed? When had my money become their emergency fund? Jessica, I said carefully, congratulations on your promotion. She blinked, clearly not expecting the topic change. Thanks, but that's not why I'm here. When did you find out about it? About what? The promotion. When did you find out? She shifted uncomfortably. Monday. But Hazel, that's not the point. Monday, 3 days before my dinner that you confirmed you'd attend. I opened my laptop and pulled up the screenshot of her Facebook post. This says your promotion was to regional sales manager. That's a big deal. Probably came with a substantial raise. Her cheeks flushed. What does that have to do with anything? It means you chose to celebrate your success instead of supporting mine, and you did it at the exact time you'd promised to be with me. It wasn't like that. The timing just worked out better, and we thought... We? I interrupted. You all discussed this without me? The flush deepened. It wasn't a conspiracy, Hazel. Mom suggested we celebrate both promotions together, but then Jessica wanted something more intimate for her team and... Stop. I held up my hand. Just stop. You're making it worse. Jessica slumped into the chair across from my desk. For a moment, she looked like the little girl who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms, the one who'd cried when she didn't make the cheerleading squad, and I'd spent my babysitting money on ice cream to cheer her up. I didn't know you were keeping track of all the money, she said quietly. I wasn't keeping track to use against you. I was keeping track because that's what responsible people do with their finances. So what now? You're just gonna cut us all off forever? I considered the question seriously. I'm going to stop automatically funding everyone else's lives, yes. But what if there's a real emergency? Then you'll handle it like adults, like I've been handling my own emergencies my entire adult life. She stared at me like I'd started speaking a foreign language. But we're family. Family shows up, I said simply. Family celebrates each other's successes. Family doesn't treat one member like a walking ATM while treating another like the golden child. Jessica opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. We sat in silence for several minutes, the weight of years of unspoken resentment settling between us like sediment. I didn't realize, she said finally. Didn't realize what? How much you've been carrying. How much you've been... left out. It was the closest thing to an acknowledgement I'd gotten from anyone in the family, and it hit harder than I expected. My throat tightened. I just wanted you guys to want to celebrate with me, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Jessica looked down at her hands. We did want to. We do want to. It's just, you're so successful already. So put together. I guess we figured you didn't need the same kind of validation that I do. Everyone needs validation, Jess. Even successful people. Especially from their family. She nodded slowly, and for a moment, I thought we might actually be getting somewhere. Then her phone buzzed, and I watched her face change as she read the message. Mom says Tyler's boss is threatening to fire him because he missed 2 client calls this morning. His phone's been off since last night. She looked up at me with those wide blue eyes that had gotten her out of trouble since childhood. Can you just turn his phone back on? Just temporarily? And there it was, the moment where old patterns tried to reassert themselves, where I was expected to solve everyone else's problems because it was easier than letting them face consequences. No, I said simply. Hazel. No. Tyler is 26 years old. If he can't figure out how to pay his own phone bill, that's between him and his service provider. Jessica stared at me like I'd slapped her. This isn't you. Maybe it is me, I said. Maybe this is who I've always been under all the people-pleasing and emergency funding. She left without another word, and I watched from my office window as she sat in her car for 10 minutes, probably texting the family group chat about how unreasonable I was being, how I'd changed, how someone needed to talk sense into me. But I didn't feel unreasonable. For the first time in years, I felt reasonable, rational, free. That evening, I ordered pizza, opened a bottle of wine I'd been saving for a special occasion, and celebrated my promotion the way I should have the night before. Quietly, personally, and without anyone else's drama obscuring the achievement that was entirely my own. 3 days of silence stretched like a held breath before the storm finally broke. I was in the middle of a client presentation when my assistant knocked softly and mouthed "family emergency" through the glass conference room door. My stomach dropped, not because I was worried, but because I knew this was the moment they'd escalate from individual guilt trips to collective intervention. I excused myself and found Tyler standing in our lobby, looking wildly out of place in his paint-splattered work clothes among the polished professionals coming and going. His face was flushed, and he kept running his hands through his hair, a nervous habit he'd had since childhood whenever he was about to get in trouble. "We need to talk," he said without preamble. "Now." I glanced around the lobby, acutely aware of my coworkers' curious stares. "This isn't the place, Tyler." "Then where?" "You won't answer your phone. You won't respond to texts. Mom's having panic attacks. And Jessica's talking about taking out a loan just to cover your share of family expenses." My share. The language was so casually possessive it took my breath away. My share of what expenses? You know what I mean. No, I really don't. Explain to me how my money became everyone else's responsibility. He shifted uncomfortably, lowering his voice as a group of executives walked past. "Look, can we just go somewhere and talk about this like adults?" Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet him at the coffee shop across the street after my presentation. The client meeting went well, a $50,000 account that would boost my quarterly numbers. But I could barely focus on the victory. Tyler's unexpected appearance had rattled something loose inside me, a familiar anxiety that I'd thought I'd finally outgrown. The coffee shop was crowded with the afternoon rush, which Tyler had probably counted on. Public spaces made dramatic confrontations less likely, or so he thought. He'd ordered for both of us. My usual vanilla latte, his black coffee with 3 sugars, a small gesture that might have felt considerate if it hadn't come with strings attached. "So," he said, settling into the chair across from me, "what's this really about? What do you mean? This whole financial cutoff thing? Mom thinks you're having some kind of breakdown." I laughed, sharp and unexpected. "A breakdown? Tyler, I got promoted to marketing director. I'm doing better than I've ever done." "Then why are you punishing everyone else for it?" The question hung between us like a challenge. I could feel the old Hazel wanting to apologize, to explain, to somehow make him understand, without making him feel bad. But the new Hazel, the one who'd spent 3 days sleeping without anxiety, had different priorities. "I'm not punishing anyone. I'm just not funding everyone's lives anymore." "Same difference." "No, it's really not." I leaned forward. "Tyler, when's the last time you paid your own phone bill?" He shifted uncomfortably. "That's not fair." "I've been between jobs." "For 8 months. You've been between jobs for 8 months while working construction full-time. Construction doesn't pay enough. Then get a different job, or a second job, or learn to budget, but stop expecting me to subsidize your lifestyle." His jaw tightened. "It's not subsidizing. It's family helping family." "When have you helped me?" The question landed like a physical blow. Tyler opened his mouth, then closed it, clearly scrambling for examples that we both knew didn't exist. I helped you move into your apartment 2 years ago. One afternoon, and I bought pizza for everyone who helped, plus gave you gas money. I don't keep track of every little. I'm not talking about keeping track. I'm talking about reciprocity, about give and take instead of just take." He was quiet for a long moment, stirring his coffee with unnecessary focus. When he looked up, his expression had shifted from defensive to something that looked almost like hurt. I didn't know you felt this way. How could you know? Nobody ever asked. But you never said anything. I shouldn't have to. When someone covers your phone bill for months, you should notice. When someone pays for your car repairs, you should say thank you. When someone repeatedly bails you out of financial problems, you should maybe consider showing up when they ask you to celebrate something important. Tyler stared into his coffee cup like it might contain answers. Jessica said you're being dramatic, that successful people don't need the same kind of support. Jessica said that? He nodded. She said you're financially stable and emotionally independent, so it's not the same as when she or I need help. I felt something cold settle in my chest. And you agreed with her? I mean, you do have your life together more than the rest of us. There it was again. The mythology that having a good job and paying my own bills meant I didn't need love, attention, or support from my family. As if success inoculated me against loneliness or disappointment. Tyler, I said carefully, having my life together doesn't mean I don't want my family to be part of it. It doesn't mean I don't need to feel valued or celebrated or even just included. He was quiet for so long, I wondered if he'd heard me. Finally, he said, I guess I never thought about it that way. I know, none of you did. At 4 p.m., I received a call from an unknown number. When I answered, a woman's voice I didn't recognize said, Is this Hazel Chen? Yes. This is Barbara, your mother's neighbor. She asked me to call you because she's having what she calls a medical emergency, but she won't let me call an ambulance. She says she needs you to come over right away. My blood pressure spiked immediately, the Pavlovian response to family crisis calls that had been trained into me over decades. What kind of medical emergency? She says her chest is tight and she can't breathe properly. She's been crying for hours and says it started when she got some bad news about finances. I closed my eyes. A panic attack. Possibly real, probably exacerbated by drama, definitely timed for maximum emotional impact. Is she conscious? Responsive? Oh yes, very much so. She's sitting on her front porch asking every few minutes if I've reached you yet. Thank you for calling, Barbara. I appreciate you checking on her. So you'll come over? I'll call her doctor and ask them to do a wellness check. If she's having a genuine medical emergency, she needs professional help, not me. The silence that followed told me everything I needed to know. If it had been a real emergency, Barbara would have insisted on the ambulance. Instead, she cleared her throat and said, I'll let her know you, suggested that. After I hung up, I did exactly what I'd promised. I called Mom's doctor's office, explained the situation, and asked for a wellness check. Then I called Mom directly. She answered on the first ring, her voice breathy and theatrical. Hazel? Oh, thank goodness. I've been so worried I could barely function. My chest feels tight, and I keep getting dizzy. Mom, I called Dr. Peterson's office. They're sending someone over to check on you. Silence. Then, in a completely different tone, You called my doctor? You told the neighbor you were having a medical emergency. Medical emergencies require medical attention. I just meant I was upset. Stressed about everything that's happening. Then you're stressed, not having a medical emergency. There's a difference. Hazel Elizabeth, I am your mother, and when I say I need you, you need me to restore your financial safety net. That's different from needing me as a daughter. The call ended when Dr. Peterson's nurse arrived. I could hear Mom's voice change from distressed to embarrassed as she explained to the healthcare professional that she was actually fine, just overwhelmed by some family issues. That evening, I received a text from an unknown number. This is Barbara, your mom's neighbor. The nurse said she's physically fine, but recommended she talk to someone about stress management. Thought you should know. Followed by, also, she asked me not to tell you this, but your brother came by around 6 with a for sale sign for some kind of watercraft. She seemed upset about it. So Tyler was selling something to try to generate quick cash. The jet ski from Jessica's celebration, maybe, or some other impulse purchase that had seemed like a good idea when someone else was covering the bills. I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on my balcony, watching the sunset paint my building's courtyard in shades of gold and orange. For the first time in years, I wasn't calculating anyone else's expenses in my head. I wasn't mentally preparing for emergency phone calls or figuring out which of my own plans I'd need to cancel to accommodate someone else's crisis. My phone buzzed one more time. A text from David. "Your mother is struggling with this situation. I know you're angry, but consider the long-term damage to family relationships. Some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt." I stared at the message for a long time. Then I typed back, "Some bridges aren't worth rebuilding if they only go one way." He didn't respond, and I didn't expect him to. David was good at identifying problems, but less skilled at acknowledging his own role in creating them. He'd been happy enough to let me subsidize his wife's car payments and his stepchildren's emergencies when it meant less financial pressure on his own income. As I got ready for bed, I realized something had fundamentally shifted in the past few days. The guilt that usually accompanied family conflicts was absent. Instead, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. The freedom to make decisions based on what was best for me, not what would keep everyone else comfortable. Tomorrow would bring new attempts at manipulation, new manufactured emergencies, new guilt trips disguised as concern for my well-being. But tonight I was going to sleep in my own bed, in my own apartment, funded by my own paycheck, without worrying about anyone else's poor choices. And for the first time since I could remember, that felt like enough. 2 weeks had passed since what I'd started thinking of as the liberation, and the family's tactics had evolved from panic to strategy. They'd clearly held a war council, because the attacks were now coordinated and surgical, designed to hit every pressure point they'd mapped over the years of knowing exactly how to manipulate my guilt. It started with Grandma Rose. Grandma had always been our family's emotional Switzerland, neutral, beloved by everyone, and historically uninvolved in financial disputes. So when she called on a Tuesday evening with a trembling voice, I knew immediately that she'd been recruited for the cause. "Hazel, sweetheart," she began, her 92-year-old voice carrying the weight of disappointment. "Your mother tells me there's been some kind of misunderstanding in the family." I settled into my couch, wine glass in hand, preparing for what I knew would be a masterclass in generational guilt. "Hi, Grandma. How are you feeling?" "Oh, I'm fine, dear. But I'm worried about you. Your mother says you've been under a lot of stress with work. And sometimes when we're overwhelmed, we make decisions we might regret later." The script was flawless. Attribute my boundary setting to stress and overwhelm, suggest that my decisions weren't rational, and position herself as the wise elder guiding me back to the family fold. I had to admire the strategy even as it made me angry. "I'm actually doing really well, Grandma. I got promoted to marketing director, and I'm finally in a position to focus on my own financial goals. That's wonderful, dear. Your mother mentioned you'd gotten some kind of advancement." Some kind of advancement. Even filtered through Grandma, my achievement had been minimized to something vague and unimportant. "She also mentioned that you've stopped helping the family with some expenses. Now, I know times are tight for everyone, but family is all we really have in this world." There it was, the nuclear option. Family loyalty delivered through the mouth of a beloved grandmother who probably had no idea she was being used as an emotional weapon. "Grandma," I said gently, "did Mom tell you that they skipped my promotion celebration to throw a party for Jessica instead? Or that she texted me during dinner to say I wasn't a priority?" A long pause. "I'm sure there was some kind of miscommunication, sweetheart." There wasn't. They made a choice, and now they're dealing with the consequences of that choice. But Hazel, holding grudges hurts you more than it hurts them. I wanted to explain that this wasn't a grudge. It was awakening. That I wasn't punishing them out of spite but protecting myself out of necessity. But explaining would mean asking Grandma to understand concepts that her generation had never had to grapple with. The idea that love could be conditional, that family could be transactional, that sometimes the people who claimed to care about you the most were the ones who hurt you the deepest. "I love you, Grandma," I said instead, "but I'm not changing my mind." The call ended with her promising to pray for our family's healing, which made me feel worse than all of Mom's accusations combined. Grandma Rose genuinely believed she was helping, that family unity was worth preserving at any cost. She'd grown up in an era where women sacrificed their own needs for family harmony as a matter of course, where questioning that sacrifice was seen as selfish and destructive. Thursday brought a new strategy: the ambush. I was leaving work around 6 p.m. when I spotted David leaning against my car in the parking garage. He looked tired, older than his 53 years, wearing the kind of strained expression that suggested he'd been volunteered for this conversation rather than choosing it himself. "Hazel," he said, straightening as I approached. "Got a minute?" "Depends what for." "I think you know what for." David had always been the family diplomat, the one who mediated disputes with calm logic and reasonable compromise. He'd married into our chaos 5 years ago and had somehow managed to stay above most of the drama. Until now. "Your mother is beside herself," he continued. "She's convinced she's failed as a parent, that she somehow raised you to be cold and calculating." "Cold and calculating," I repeated slowly. "That's what she said?" "Those weren't her exact words." "What were her exact words?" He sighed. "She said she doesn't understand how someone she raised to be generous and loving could turn so heartless overnight." The accusation stung precisely because it was designed to. Mom knew exactly which words would cut deepest, which characterizations would make me question my own morality. Heartless. The opposite of everything I'd tried to be for my entire adult life. "David," I said, unlocking my car but not getting in, "you've been married to my mother for 5 years. In that time, how many of my achievements has this family celebrated?" He frowned. "What do you mean?" "I mean parties, dinners, congratulations that lasted longer than a text message. How many times has anyone in this family made an effort to acknowledge something I accomplished?" The silence stretched uncomfortably. David was a smart man, an accountant by trade, someone who noticed patterns and details for a living. I could see him scrolling through his memory, looking for examples and coming up empty. "You're very independent," he said finally. "You don't seem to need that kind of validation." "Everyone needs validation from their family, David, even independent people. But you have to understand their perspective. Jessica struggles with confidence, Tyler's been having a hard time finding his direction, and your mother worries constantly about both of them. You've always been the stable one, the one who has everything figured out. Having everything figured out doesn't mean I don't want my family to care about my life." He nodded slowly, and I could see something shifting in his expression. "The dinner was handled poorly," he admitted. "I told your mother that at the time." "You did?" "I said it seemed cruel to cancel on you last minute for Jessica's celebration, especially when you'd been planning yours for days." It was the first acknowledgement from anyone in the family that they'd actually done something wrong, not just that I'd overreacted to a misunderstanding. "But," David continued, and I braced myself for the inevitable pivot, "your response has been disproportionate. Cutting off all financial support without warning? That's not just boundary setting, Hazel. That's punishment. It's consequences." "It's the same thing." "No, it's not. Punishment is inflicting suffering for past behavior. Consequences are natural outcomes of choices. They chose to treat me like I wasn't important. The natural consequence is that I stopped prioritizing their needs over my own." David was quiet for several minutes, processing this distinction. Finally, he said, "Your mother loves you. They all do." "I used to think love and exploitation were mutually exclusive," I replied. Turns out, I was naive. That weekend, I decided to test something. I'd been invited to my college friend Rachel's housewarming party, the kind of casual social event I usually skipped because family obligations had a way of materializing whenever I made plans for myself. But this time, I RSVP'd yes and actually went. The party was everything I'd forgotten social gatherings could be. People celebrated each other's successes without keeping scorecards. Conversations flowed without anyone tracking who owed what to whom. When someone mentioned a promotion or achievement, the response was genuine excitement, not calculations about how it might benefit everyone else. I was talking with Rachel's neighbor about her recent gallery opening when my phone started buzzing insistently. Mom calling. I let it go to voicemail. Then Jessica. Also voicemail. Then Tyler, David, and finally a number I didn't recognize. Rachel noticed me checking my phone and raised an eyebrow. "Everything okay?" "Family emergency," I said, then caught myself. "Actually, no family drama disguised as an emergency." She laughed. "The worst kind. Want to talk about it?" And suddenly, I did. Standing in Rachel's kitchen, surrounded by people who barely knew me but were treating me with more consideration than my own family had in years, I found myself telling the whole story. The missed dinner, the financial exploitation, the coordinated guilt campaign. When I finished, Rachel was quiet for a moment. Then she said something that crystallized everything I'd been feeling. "You know what's crazy? If a boyfriend treated you the way your family treats you, every woman in this room would tell you to dump him immediately." The observation hit like a lightning bolt. She was absolutely right. If a romantic partner had missed my promotion celebration to be with someone else, then demanded I continue financially supporting them while calling me heartless for being upset about it, I would have ended that relationship without a second thought. But because it was family, because it was blood, because it was wrapped in the language of love and obligation, I'd been expected to endure it indefinitely. "So why is family different?" Rachel continued. "Why do we accept treatment from relatives that we'd never tolerate from anyone else?" I didn't have an answer, but I was starting to think that maybe I didn't need one. Maybe the assumption that family relationships were different, special, exempt from the basic standards of respect and reciprocity was exactly the problem. When I got home around midnight, I had 14 missed calls and a voicemail box that was completely full. I deleted them all without listening. Then I did something I'd never done before. I blocked my mother's number, and Jessica's, and Tyler's. I kept David unblocked. He was the only one who'd shown any ability to acknowledge wrongdoing. But I sent him a text. "I need space to figure out what I want from these relationships. Please ask everyone to stop calling and texting for now. If there's a genuine emergency requiring medical attention, call 911. If there's a genuine emergency requiring financial assistance, call a bank." His response came an hour later. "I understand. Take the time you need." That night, I slept for 10 hours straight. No anxiety dreams about family crises. No middle-of-the-night panic about whether someone needed help I wasn't providing. Just deep, dreamless sleep that felt like a luxury I'd forgotten existed. When I woke up, my phone showed 0 missed calls. For the first time in years, my family had actually listened to a boundary I'd set. It felt like a small miracle. But I knew it wouldn't last. They were regrouping, planning, figuring out new angles of attack. The money I'd been providing wasn't just convenience for them, it was survival. And people fighting for survival don't give up after 2 weeks of radio silence. The real test was still coming. The final confrontation came exactly 3 weeks after the dinner that changed everything, and it arrived in the form of an email with the subject line, "From your family." I almost deleted it without reading, but something about the formality made me curious. It wasn't from any individual family member. The sender was listed as the Chen family, as if they'd incorporated themselves into a united front against me. The email was long, clearly written by committee, and devastating in its manipulation. Hazel, we've tried to reach you individually, but since you've blocked our numbers, we're writing this together as a family. We want you to know that we love you, and we're concerned about the path you've chosen. We understand that you felt overlooked at the dinner, and we sincerely apologize for that miscommunication. However, your response has been disproportionate and has caused significant harm to people you claim to love. Tyler lost his job because his phone was disconnected during an important client call. Jessica had to take out a high-interest loan to cover her student payments, damaging her credit score. Mom's car was nearly repossessed, and the stress has triggered anxiety attacks that required medical attention. David has been working extra hours to cover household expenses. We're not asking you to resume all financial support immediately, but we need you to understand that your actions have consequences beyond your own life. Family means sacrifice, compromise, and putting the collective good above individual grievances. We raised you to understand these values. If you're willing to discuss this rationally, we'll be at Grandma Rose's house this Sunday at 2 p.m. She's offered to mediate this conversation because she loves all of us and wants to see our family healed. We hope you'll choose love over pride. With concern and hope for reconciliation, Mom, Jessica, Tyler, and David. I read it 3 times, marveling at the craftsmanship. Every sentence was designed to make me feel guilty, selfish, and responsible for problems I hadn't created. Tyler's job loss was my fault for cutting off his phone, not his fault for depending on me to pay his bills. Jessica's credit damage was my fault for stopping transfers, not her fault for living beyond her means. Mom's anxiety was my fault for setting boundaries, not her fault for treating me like a personal bank. The email painted them as victims of my cruelty and me as a selfish daughter who'd forgotten her family values. It reframed the entire situation to make my boundary setting look like abuse and their financial exploitation look like normal family interdependence. But what struck me most was the last line. We hope you'll choose love over pride. As if standing up for myself was pride. As if demanding basic respect was selfishness. As if love was supposed to be one-sided, flowing from me to them without expectation of reciprocity. I deleted the email and spent Saturday doing something I'd never done before. I went apartment hunting, not because I needed to move, but because I wanted to. My current place was fine, but it was small, and I'd been making do with fine for years because every extra dollar went to family crises. Now, with $840 staying in my account each month, I could afford something better. The third apartment I looked at was perfect. A corner unit with floor-to-ceiling windows, a real dining room instead of a breakfast nook, and a home office with enough space for the mahogany desk I'd been wanting since college. The rent was $600 more than my current place, but for the first time in my adult life, I could afford it without stress. I'll take it, I told the leasing agent. Don't you want to think about it? Discuss it with your family? No, I said, signing the application with a flourish. This decision is mine. Sunday at 2 p.m. came and went without me. I spent the afternoon at Target, buying things for my new apartment. Expensive candles that I'd always told myself were frivolous. Art prints that made me happy instead of neutral decor, chosen to avoid offending anyone's taste. A coffee maker that cost more than I used to spend on groceries in a week, back when I was subsidizing everyone else's lives. At 3:47 p.m., David called from an unblocked number, probably Grandma's house phone. Hazel, everyone's here. Grandma made her famous cookies, and we're all hoping you'll reconsider. Reconsider what? Coming to talk this through. We're family. We can work this out. What's there to work out? The financial arrangements, for one thing. We could set up a more formal system, maybe with scheduled payments instead of the automatic transfers. That way you'd feel more control over." I hung up. The control they thought I wanted wasn't over payment schedules or formal systems. It was over my own life, my own priorities, my own definition of love and family. They were still trying to negotiate a return to financial support, while completely ignoring the emotional abandonment that had triggered this entire situation. Monday morning brought a new approach: professional intervention. My direct supervisor, Amanda, asked to see me in her office around 10 a.m. She closed the door and gestured to the chair across from her desk. "Hazel, I got an unusual call this morning. Someone claiming to be your mother, expressing concern about your mental health." My blood turned to ice. "She called my workplace?" "She did. She said you'd been under tremendous stress and might need some kind of professional support. She suggested that your recent promotion might have triggered some kind of breakdown." The audacity was breathtaking. Mom had called my boss to suggest that my success had caused a mental health crisis, probably hoping that professional concern would force me back into family therapy or counseling that would guilt me into resuming financial support. "Amanda," I said carefully, "I want you to know that I'm in the best mental health of my adult life. I'm sleeping better, performing better at work, and generally happier than I've been in years." She studied my face. "You do seem more focused lately, more confident." I set some boundaries with family members who were taking advantage of me financially. "They're not handling it well." Amanda nodded slowly. "Family dynamics can be complicated. But I want you to know that your work performance has been exceptional since your promotion. Whatever you're doing in your personal life, it's clearly working professionally." After Amanda dismissed the family's concerns, they tried one final strategy: public humiliation. Jessica created a Facebook post that tagged me and painted herself as the concerned sister trying to reach out to a sibling in crisis. The post was artfully written, full of vague references to family struggles and hoping for healing that made me sound mentally unstable without actually saying anything actionable. I screenshotted the post, then commented publicly, "Thanks for your concern, Jess. I'm doing great. Just focusing on my career and personal growth. Hope you're well too." Then I untagged myself and blocked her on all social media platforms. The public nature of my response, calm and professional, made her post look exactly like what it was: an attempt at manipulation through social pressure. Several mutual friends messaged me privately to ask if I was okay, and to mention that Jessica's post had seemed kind of weird and passive-aggressive. 3 months later, I moved into my new apartment. I hired professional movers instead of asking family for help. I bought all new furniture instead of making do with hand-me-downs. I threw myself a housewarming party and invited my colleagues, my college friends, and my neighbors from the old building. The party was small but genuine. People brought wine and flowers and warm congratulations. Rachel gave a toast to new beginnings and the courage to choose yourself. My neighbor from 4B, an elderly woman named Mrs. Patterson, told me she was proud of me for building something beautiful that's entirely your own. Nobody asked about my family's absence. Nobody pressured me to reconcile or compromise or choose love over pride. They just celebrated with me in the way I'd always hoped my family would. 6 months after the dinner that changed everything, I got a text from an unknown number. It was Tyler. "Hey, it's me, got a new number. I wanted you to know that I got a second job. Paying my own bills now. I think I understand what you meant about consequences." I stared at the message for a long time before responding. "I'm proud of you. Think we could grab coffee sometime? No agenda, no family stuff, just brother and sister. I'd like that." A year later, Tyler and I have monthly coffee dates where we talk about work, books, movies, everything except family drama. He's never asked me for money, and I've never offered. Our relationship is smaller now, but it's real. Jessica and I exchanged Christmas cards last year. Polite, distant, but without hostility. She included a note saying she'd finally paid off her student loans and that she understood why I'd needed space. Mom and I haven't spoken since the email intervention. Sometimes I miss her, or rather, I miss the version of her I thought existed before I realized how conditional her love was. David sends occasional updates. They downsized to a smaller house. Mom found a part-time job. Everyone is managing without my financial support. I don't regret my choice. I sleep peacefully, spend my money on things that bring me joy, and show up for people who show up for me. My promotion came with another raise 6 months later, and I celebrated at the restaurant of my choice with friends who genuinely wanted to be there. Sometimes the cruelest thing you can do to people who've gotten used to using you is to stop being useful. But sometimes it's also the kindest thing you can do for yourself. Family isn't just about blood or shared history or obligation. It's about mutual respect, genuine care, and showing up when it matters. And if the people who share your DNA can't offer that, it's okay to build your own family from people who can. The table I set for myself is smaller now, but everyone who sits at it actually wants to be there. And that, I've learned, makes all the difference.